Good morning and happy Friday. My name is Phyllis Newbill, and I'm the Associate Director in one of several centers within ICAT, the Center for Educational Networks and Impacts. I want to welcome everyone this morning. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. As always, we are live streaming, so good morning to our friends online. So just know that this exists on the internet and will exist on the internet afterwards. There are pastries and coffee and tea, so please help yourself. The way we are able to pay for pastries and coffee and tea is that you have to sign in on the sheet, so we can tell people that you really did come. So please sign in on the clipboard as that goes around. If you are Virginia Tech faculty and PDN or Professional Development Network credit is helpful to you, please, one, register for that. There's a QR code at the bottom of the clipboard. And also, so sign in for it, and then just make sure you contact or make eye contact with me at some point, and I will give you credit. When you have questions today, just wait for me to get to you with the microphone so folks online can hear us. And if you're online, please use that questions button. Upcoming, we had the New Music Technology Festival last week. Great. ICAT Day is coming up on May 4th. That'll be in the Center for the Arts in the afternoon, so looking forward to that. Let me know if you have any questions about that. So, it's time for me to hand it over to Ace. You ready to roll? All right. And your mic is up here, so. All right, I'm turning it over to the team to learn about our emerging creatives.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and to the folks online for also joining us. My name is Ace Wang. I am a second-year PhD student in the STS program here, and one of the people representing Virginia Tech that went to the A2RU Rewilding Summit. And I'll let James also introduce himself.
I'm James Mathai. I'm a CS major. I'm going to be graduating in May, and I'm also pursuing a creative writing minor. And yeah, we also had two other people, Mooney and Faith, and they both had conflicts that they couldn't be here today, but they did send in some stuff for you to watch.
So we'll kind of dive right into it today. We're gonna quickly go over what A2RU is, as well as the Emerging Creative Student Summit that we attended. Sorry, it says person 1 to 4. We have some experiences and takeaways from the summit to share, and then we'll open the floor for questions and answers. So some of you guys might already know what A2RU is. For those that don't, it stands for the Alliance for the Arts and Research Universities. Virginia Tech is one of hundreds of universities that participate in this alliance, or 35 institutions participating in this alliance. And the goal is to integrate arts research and various disciplines, pulling them together to create creative practices and scholarship for the benefit of global society. And so every year they do a Emerging Creative Summit, which is a 3-day program where students from places like Virginia Tech, as well as other institutions like Georgia Tech, UPenn, University of Rochester, we met people from all over the place. And we're forming small interdisciplinary teams. So I had people on my team who were art historians, human-computer interaction designer, I'm an STS person, and then there was a music major. I know James had a different sort of array of disciplines that his team was comprised of. And over the course of these 3 days, we collaborated to create a little project together that centers around the theme of the conference or the summit, which this year was rewilding. Do you want to add? So I just wanted to quickly share some of my experiences and takeaways from attending this summit. The first one is this idea that like an idea can be great, but then a constellation of ideas really creates great questions. So you can have a really great idea or a statement, and then when you put it together with other people's thoughts, it definitely makes it more interesting. And what we did, we used so many Post-it notes at the beginning of our collaborations, just sort of sticking them together and recombining them. And we only had 3 days to like create something from scratch, to get on the same page about language and about like, what do we mean when we say rewilding? What do we mean when we say rewilding the body? So my group, we focused on what does it mean when we put this concept of rewilding together with ideas of body and self. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the structural constraints in doing 3 days. Obviously, one of them is time. At the beginning, we had a framework which is inquire, ideate, incubate, and implement. Out of those 4 quadrants, I would say that incubate was very challenging, just given the structures of a 3-day program. And we found these structures to be kind of limiting of our projects, of our collaborations at various levels, but we also learned through the summit of many ways in which we can attend to or deal with these constraints within our interactions with one another. So there was a really great activity that we did that was based on improv theater, where we tried to plan a party together, and we had to start our responses with no and that was an impossible party to plan. We changed that to responding to the other person, beginning with yes, but, and that got to some interesting parties. And then finally we tried yes, and that was very, obviously that worked a lot better than no and yes, but. And so that was sort of, that's sort of one of many examples in which these small things that we do can help with some of the structural constraints that we faced. And then, so related to that, there's, my third takeaway is that between yes and no are places that are really rich to dig, right? So if someone's like, no, I don't like that, or like, yes, I love that, these two answers aren't the only answers that are available to you. It could be yes, but, right, which is one of the scripts that we practiced. And that allows us to identify, okay, like we like this idea, kind of, what exactly about this isn't really connecting with you? Are there ways that, you love this part about this idea, but then this like one thing, if we can change that, or make it more accessible, or make it, X, Y, or Z. And so that's kind of just an overview of my takeaways and insights of the entire program. I don't want to monopolize the time, so I'll just say that for my group's collaboration and project, again, we focused on bodies and rewilding, and the idea that we came up with was this idea that to rewild ourselves, our actions, we need to rewild our spaces. And so we had this initial idea of a performance art piece where the body is constrained in a particular space. And there's only so many ways to move within that space. And as the space transforms and grows, our range of movements, our gestures, our actions can change with that. We had a hard time putting together an entire multimedia performance piece in 3 days. So what we ended up doing was creating a small carousel music box that would represent some of the themes, or like what we would actually want to do with our full bodies and our full performance. And part of that was the creation of a few poems. And if there's time at the end, maybe I'll share a poem or two with you.
All right, so I just have some pictures. On the top, left and right, you can see some photos of my team's project. We had the guy playing the sax is a jazz and music instruction major. The person next to him is a sculptor, and she created this sort of wheel-looking sculpture that's there. Our project was kind of weird because we were trying to really incorporate everybody's individual discipline and create like an experience that would somehow join all of these people together. There's also, I don't have a picture of her, but we also had an opera singer who was pursuing, I think, a master's in opera singing. So it was like really difficult to try and find a way to like get all those disciplines together into a single project or experience. And so what we decided to do is just create a bunch of different parts. The sculpture obviously is one. You can see there are people putting sticky notes on the sculpture. So what we did was we had all these sticky notes right next to it, and we had a little sign that said, take them, put them wherever you want. Based on how people interacted with the sculpture, where they were looking, were they going to the walls, were they putting stuff. We were just in an office, so they could put sticky notes on a couch or a chair, or sometimes they would pick up random items from the office that we didn't know anything about. But basically, based off of how people were interacting with the sculpture and the room, Bo, who's playing the sax, would play different stuff. I mean, he was improvising the whole time. He would pick up different instruments. He also played flute and trumpet, and he also had a few like weird flutes, like wooden flutes that he would pick up. So it was like pretty crazy. I wouldn't say that our project was super focused, but it was fun. I also, my part was, unfortunately, it was light, very light in the room. We tried to project this, what you're about to see, onto the wall, but nobody could see it. So it is what it is. But basically, what I had done is created a sort of model of predator-prey dynamics, and we were bringing in different, like, we were bringing in predators or prey entities depending on like certain rules to do with how people were interacting with the room. And I blurred it so that you couldn't really tell what was going on. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but if it's not, you're just going to have to imagine it. Which is good, because it's probably better in your imagination than it actually is. But yeah, maybe I'll come back to that. I had two main takeaways. You know, my favorite part of the conference was not actually the group project. I mean, it was an interesting avenue to get at like other things. So I was really interested in just like talking to people. There were a lot of really cool people from various different disciplines. I mean, I'd never talked to anybody who was an opera singer before, you know, and that's pretty fun. On the bottom there you see we went to this restaurant with a couple of other people from different groups. One of those people was actually in Faith's group, and they were in like digital art, so doing lighting and stuff like that, which was cool. The bottom center is me wearing this, I don't really know what it was, but it was another team's project. They had gone around and asked every single person at the conference to take like a piece of plastic out of a big, a piece of cloth out of a big plastic tub and just do something with it. So some people kind of did really elaborate things. They braided different pieces of cloth together. Some people just ripped a piece and then gave it back to the people. And they sort of combined all those pieces into this thing that you could wear if you wanted to. So I did. And so, you know, just getting a chance to talk to all those people and see what they were doing, talk about all those projects, was pretty fun. The other takeaway that I had was, it's kind of an unrelated tangent, but as Ace said, the structure of the thing was very rigid. I mean, there was a lot of time pressure because it was only a few days that we had. And they also had us doing other events. So we toured a museum. We toured a couple of museums. It was interesting, but it meant that we really didn't have a lot of time. And in order to make the most of our time, they were giving us like all these strategies for how to work together in a team. How do you come up with ideas? Like just a lot of stuff to do with that. And I was sort of, my initial idea was that it was going to be an art piece that we were making. And I found that like when you're thinking about so many different strategies, like rigid things about like, when you're looking at charts and you're thinking about yes and or no but and all this stuff, it is less about like creating art, and it's almost more about like bringing creativity to a project. And I think a lot of people sort of gravitated towards art pieces. I know that I checked out some of the previous year's projects, and a lot of them were less, I don't know if it was just a theme this year or what, but like almost everyone, I think, I might be mistaken, but almost everyone created like an art piece for their project. And in hindsight, I think I sort of wish that, I'm not sure that an art piece is actually really the thing that they were going for. So I had this kind of provocative question, because I know that at least some of you in the audience are academics and artists. I think as I was at the conference, I sort of had this theory that academics don't really make the best artists. The reason being that like they're incorporating creativity into their field. And there's nothing like wrong with incorporating creativity into your field, but it's not really, I mean, I couldn't think of, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I couldn't think of any like really great artists who were like academics first. I mean, I know plenty of artists who became professors or whatever after because they were so good at their thing. But yeah, so if we have time at the end, I would love to hear people who are definitely older and wiser than I am tell me why I'm wrong about that. But yeah, I think I'll stop rambling and see if my video didn't work, other people's might not either, which would be unfortunate. Yeah, this is Faith's. She was on a team that did, well, let's see if the video works. Well, I'll try to explain her project as best as I can. I drove 9 hours in the car with her both ways, so I got a kind of a good sense of what she did. Her team was, as I said, they had a couple of like digital artists on their team, and so they tried to create this kind of speculative future sort of thing where they started out with a scene that was like a nature scene, and then they transitioned the nature scene into a city that was just like sort of a typical city kind of environment. And then they wanted to sort of demonstrate basically like in order to get at the theme of rewilding, they wanted to first show like what happens if we try to exert our control over the natural environment too much. So they sort of created this dystopian future version of the city. And then finally, at the end, the last slide was kind of like, what if we recognized the error in our ways and sort of started to try and allow nature to become more incorporated into this environment. So the final slide was kind of a hopeful thing of, the city that had gone through this kind of arc and finally, yes, I think it's working. But yeah, their project was cool. There were a lot of really cool ones. I unfortunately don't really know that much about Mooney's, so if her video doesn't work, I'll be kind of lost. Yeah, well, sorry to Faith and Moody. I don't know if they're watching. I think Moody's watching, so sorry. But yeah, I think that's all I had. Obviously, thank you to Lisa and everybody at ICAT, Melissa, for helping us, with all the logistics and getting over there and getting a fleet car and everything. And obviously Veronica, who put together this whole conference, she was very, very busy. And like all of the A2RU people at the conference were just always constantly running around trying to help people get stuff. And the MSU people gave us a projector, and they were, it was very hectic, and I'm not sure how they managed to pull it together, but they did. So yeah, big thanks to all of them. And I think unless you have anything else, then we can do questions or comments.
Thank you so much for sharing your work and your experiences. Technology is like that. That's what it does. And there's some irony in emerging creatives and emerging technologies. What questions do we have in the room and online? It's very quiet. You have to wait just a minute for them to get their questions together.
So in response to the artist and the academic, I think if you have a definition for art and you have a definition for academics, then you're going to limit creativity. That's it.
That's good.
I did share this theory with somebody at the conference, and he said that he kind of agreed with me, but that it was more of like a modern problem, like that the way that everybody is so specialized and kind of institutionalized in whatever field they're in limits people's ability to create art. But he was also, I don't know what he was like an electrical engineer or something, I don't know.
This was clearly one of the more provocative parts of your presentation, so congratulations, I enjoyed that. I think the specialization was not just in terms of artists who specialize in particular things, but also specialized knowledge that might be required of audiences. There's a famous article that was published by the academic composer Milton Babbitt in the 1950s. It was titled, "Who Cares If You Listen?" But the subtitle was "The Composer is Specialist." And his argument was that just as the average person can no longer understand the most advanced physics or math, they couldn't no longer understand the most advanced music, art, etc. Obviously, that's itself a controversial argument, but I think that if you look in history, and you widen your view to, let's say, artists in institutions as opposed to artists who are working independently, the artists who are able to be paid for their work, in other words, to have independence from institutions simply because they're getting paid for it. There may be a correlation there. On the other hand, some of the finest artists, Johann Sebastian Bach, I'm a musician, was essentially an institutional composer, and he taught Latin and all sorts of other things. So let me end this with a question for you, which is, what is the best art? How in others, can you expand on and defend your proposition a little bit more? Because I think it's intriguing what you're saying.
Yeah, I would say, just off the top of my head, I like George Saunders. I like Dire Straits. And Mark Knopfler was actually an English instructor, I think, before he started the band, so maybe I'm disproving my point. But I like Miles Davis. I think that maybe one thing that I was thinking about as you were talking, and I don't want to take too much time, Face has anything to say, but I wonder whether, like, I'm sort of responding to a thing that I heard a lot of people say, mostly the older people at the conference, who were very involved in their field, whatever it was, graduate thing that they were studying, or some of the people that were putting on the conference and were in academia for a long time. They said certain things about, like, their artistic practice, and they said very, like, intelligent sounding things about their artistic practice. And it just sort of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. It just sort of made me think, like, I don't think that's how it works. Like, the one quote that I keep repeating to people when I try to make this point is, somebody said, like, I've been trying to incorporate the idea of breath into my artistic practice. And I mean, that's cool, but it just, like, I don't know what that means, really. And I'm not sure that that's the right direction to be going in. You might find that the idea of breath is coming out in your artistic practice, but at least in my experience, that's not how it goes. And a lot of this is a question of, like, kind of fear for me, because I'm a CS major who's also interested in art, and I'm sort of like, is that even possible, you know? Obviously it's possible, but will I suck is the question.
I'm still interested in this idea also of incubation, and maybe it relates a little bit to academia and art and definition, but in terms of incubation, when I think about something incubating, I think about having a baby, something that's going to take a really long time. But then also I think of, like, Einstein, doing the amazing things he was doing, and I've always read that he took walks. He would be brilliant at home and then walk around Harvard Yard or whatever. And while you were talking, I was thinking that's sort of incubating, maybe. So what were some of the takeaways that you got from, if you don't have time, and I never have a whole lot of time, I'll probably never make another baby, but how do you incubate on the fly?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So we've talked about this a little bit, but the structure and the schedule of the whole summit was, like, so tight and intense, and there was almost like a really interesting tension that came up throughout the conference between chaos and rewilding and, like, being free and having that be managed, right? Like, rewilding is a concept that comes across in a lot of different fields who interpret it very differently. And so one of the people who spoke to us was a wildlife management, or she worked in the field of wildlife management. And so her concept around rewilding was very much like, how do we manage this process where rewilding is the result? And then you have other people who are thinking about, like, the process itself as kind of wild and free. And so going back to incubation, My group had an idea, and we were like running down the road with this idea, and then we all took the night and slept, and then the next day when we came back, we were like, wait, can we talk about this idea again and change things up? So I think everything from like sleeping to taking walks to having a meal together, my group and I actually decided that we were, gonna like not do some of the planned activities, and we were gonna go for a little walk around the MSU campus, which they have like over 100 acres of like wild space. It was beautiful out there. And so the organizers might see that as us sort of like being, I don't know, knocking off and not doing what we need to do. But for me, the way that I was thinking about it was, this is incubation time, and this is rewilding time, and this is what's gonna support the creative process for me and my team. And I'm doing the work of rewilding by not following these instructions. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but it was pretty interesting to think about like incubation and managing things versus letting things just kind of like go free. Do you have anything?
All right, well, we are at time, so I want to first thank you all for sharing the tensions of creativity, and I think you all worked around many facets of that, and I thank you for that. And I think that's part of the purpose of that conference, so thank you for sharing that. Thank you all for being here this morning. There are more pastries and more coffee, so please enjoy more conversation. We'll be back again next week, same time, same place. Have a great weekend. Thanks, y'all.